First up, public hearing on an application for a conditional use permit submitted by Hudson YMCA for a temporary use structure or storage container in the skate park area at 2211 Vine Street. Anybody like to comment?
Yeah, Mark Hollis here with Hudson YMCA, Chris Puff, Executive Director.
Hey, guys.
We just, our plan is, okay. Our plan is to convert our current garage slash summer youth center into a year-round youth center. So we need that garage space in order to be able to accommodate our snow removal equipment, ice melt, and those sorts of things.
The focus for us is to have a system that we can actually put in the skate park. We'll blend in with our ramps behind the building, out of mostly public view, except if you're in our parking lot, to be able to store those items.
What's the time frame, if I may ask, for trying to complete that? The time frame for trying to complete what you're doing there?
Well, the teen center project, we will be starting to do that project very soon. That whole complex, which is roughly a 4.5, 5-car garage, will be turned into a year-round teen center that will be open to any of our youth in the community. So we need that space to put the snow removal items in, because it won't be in that teen center space.
I guess I should have been more direct on my question. Why do you need a storage container, say, over a year?
We do not have space for the snow removal equipment.
Okay, that's what I meant by, okay.
So the snow removal that's temporary storage, right? What you're asking for here? Or is it permanent?
The original request was a permanent space in our skate park for that equipment.
But I thought I read history as a temporary use structure. Did I miss
It's a
something?
temporary structure, temporary use. Temporary uses are only 2 years. Temporary structures aren't defined in code as something that necessarily has limitation. My suggestion is that this does get reviewed, or my recommendation that it does get reviewed within a year and a half, within 12 months or 2 years, so that they have a better idea of what their long-term strategy will be, but also understanding that they have an immediate need to store some of their equipment.
So are you just gonna buy like a shipping container?
That's correct.
Have that on site?
Painted to match the building.
Within our fenced-in skate park area.
Okay.
Anybody? Oh, I'm sorry, I just, a public hearing, isn't it? Does anybody else want to comment on this?
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody here to comment? Anybody here to comment? Any other comments? Hearing none.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Got a motion second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Let's see. Public hearing on an application for conditional use permit submitted by Hop and Barrel Brewing Company, LLC, Justin Turbies, to operate a brewery at 310 2nd Street. Comments? Justin?
Yes.
Mostly, I think I've submitted all of my information by letter, but if there are any questions, I guess I'm not sure if now's the time or during discussion is appropriate.
Okay.
Discussion's fine.
Probably, I mean, we could discuss now, it's on the agenda for later on, but, anybody, questions or anything? Is anybody here to comment on this? Anybody else here to comment on this? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Motion to close the public hearing.
And I'll second.
Motion second to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you. Public hearing regarding the proposed project plan, boundaries and creation of tax incremental district, number 5. Let's see, public hearing notice is published in Hudson Star Observer on June 1st, 2017 and June 8th, 2017. Comments? Sean?
Mayor and Plan Commission, good evening. I think 2 pieces of information were included in your packets, but I've got copies of the plan and of the presentation if anyone would like those, or is everyone okay? Okay.
Okay.
this up on the screen. Oh, perfect. To start the public hearing on this topic, Mike had suggested that I do an executive summary of the project plan. So what I'd like to cover with the group, and maybe if I can just get a sense, how many of you have any familiarity with tax increment financing? Okay, so we're off to a good start there. I am going to spend a little time at the beginning just talking about how it works a little bit, and then we'll get into the specifics of the proposed tax increment district number 5. So feel free to interrupt me with questions as I move through, if that's okay with the group. But we'll start with the basics and then get into the specifics, the boundaries, the plan, the cash flow of the district, and the steps to actually create a district. We'll cover all that in the executive summary. Okay, to start out with, oops, sorry about that. There we go. To start out with, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the logistics of tax increment financing work. The mayor has heard this and Mike has heard this, but it's a good review. The first step in creating a tax increment district is picking a boundary within the city that you would like to see development or economic development or redevelopment occur in. What we're going to be talking about today is the St. Croix Meadows dog park, race park, dog race park, the redevelopment of that site. That site currently has a taxable value to it. It's somewhere in the range of $5 million. For tax increment financing, that current value is categorized as the base value of the tax increment district. That value is taxed. The revenue from the taxes on that value go to each of the taxing jurisdictions. So the county, the school district, the city, and the tech college each get a share of that. When a tax increment district is created, any new value that is generated on the site up and above that base value under the tax increment language is categorized as increment value. Increment value is taxed at the same rate as any other value, base value or value not associated with a tax increment district at all. But the difference is increment value, instead of going to all the different taxing jurisdictions, it goes to a separate fund that the city is in charge of. So while the tax increment district is in place, the city is collecting the city share, the county share, the tech college, and the school district share of the taxes on the increment value. And then that revenue that the city is collecting is going to pay back expenditures or incentives that really generated the creation of that value in the first place, of that increment value in the first place. And this process continues until either the maximum life of the tax increment district has been reached, which in the one we're talking about today is 27 years, or the expenditures that the city incurred to promote the redevelopment in the first place have been paid back, and then the district would close. When it closes, that increment value, which remember is the taxes on it are only going to that tax increment fund that the city is monitoring. After it has paid back all its expenses and the district closes, that increment value comes back and is now part of the broad tax base of the city, the school district, the county, and the tech college.
What happens in between then when you say the city collects the money and the county, the technical college, everybody else forgoes, any contribution of that? Do they just plain lose out over the life of, does the county lose all that increment tax money through the life of the district then?
Yeah, during the district's life, all of that revenue, including the city share, is only used to pay back expenses.
City too.
City too, yeah. The city doesn't get to carve their share out and pay general city expenses.
Okay.
All of it goes to that. And a couple things to follow up a little bit on your point. One is that when we create a tax increment district, what we're saying is, but for using this tool, It either is not going to happen at all, or is unlikely, or not to the degree that we'd like to see it. The increment value is not going to happen. So the theory is that during the life of the TIF, the other taxing jurisdictions are not really losing anything because it wouldn't have been there in the first place. And secondly, just so the Plan Commission is aware, prior to the meeting this evening, we had a meeting of what's called the Joint Review Board. And that's made up of members of each of the taxing jurisdictions who have a say in the creation of this district as well. So everybody's represented in the process.
So Sean, explaining what happens with the original taxation on that's being frozen. So the property's being frozen at, I think it's currently about $100,000.
Yeah, it's about $5 million in value, about $100,000 in revenue. That $100,000 in revenue will continue to go to all the taxing jurisdictions as it has in the past. A tax increment district is not a situation where you're taking existing tax revenue that is going to all the taxing jurisdictions and pulling it into a fund, a new fund that's created for this purpose. We're only capturing the new value up and above that base value, and we're not pulling any of that existing tax revenue away from the jurisdictions.
You know, if I may, for just a second, to put it into perspective, had we had a developer come in, let's say in 2001, when that dog track first closed, we likely would have had that TIF district paid off by now. Okay, or close to it. So if we'd have had some type of development in there over the course of this time, while the value of that property has in fact been decreasing, we could have actually pretty much had this thing paid off by now if we'd have had a development in there. But
Are you implying going forward the same scenario will happen?
as far as, what do you mean?
Well, paying it off early, because that's kind of what I'm reading you saying.
That's what I'm asking too, is it always 27 years?
Sean will get into that.
Okay, or can we?
Okay.
Yeah, if it's okay, I will
No,
get
no,
to
I
that.
mean, I didn't.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving forward with the presentation, again, keeping in mind that question, what I've listed on page 4 here are the eligible expenses that the city would be allowed to pay for these costs using the tax increment district as the tool for them. So it's a pretty wide-ranging list that goes from public works improvements or infrastructure to land assembly costs, relocation costs, utility infrastructure costs, development incentives or cash grants, environmental remediation, as well as any of those projects outside of the boundaries of the district but within a half mile. So this is the list of potential costs that, again, the city can incur and use the tax increment district revenue to repay. All right? Okay. The next slide, page 5. Oh, yeah.
You want, you know.
We've got a few extra
yeah,
copies
you
there,
can use my
Sean.
copy here if you want.
Doesn't he have some in that handbook?
Anyone else wants one?
We got that somewheres.
Sean?
Excuse me.
Thanks, Brenda. Slide number 5, I want to highlight a couple things on here. What you see in the middle is the proposed boundaries of tax increment district number 5. It actually constitutes just a single parcel, the St. Croix Meadows site. It also does include a little bit of right-of-way around Carmichael, abutting that property. Now, the broad purpose of tax increment district number 5 is the redevelopment of the St. Croix Meadows site, and we're seeing that being accomplished through a combination of public improvements and other incentives to promote redevelopment there. The goal is to take the existing $5 million in valuation and turn it into a number much higher than that. And preliminary projections are up to $150 million in valuation on the site. And in doing that, also create additional job opportunities and employment opportunities in the city. The district itself, there's a couple different types of districts that you can create. One is an industrial district, another is a mixed-use district, a third is a blight elimination district. Given the current status of this site and looking at the statute, the blight elimination works here for this district. And it allows the district to have up to a maximum of a 27-year life. In terms of the expenditures that are included in the project plan as envisioned costs in order to promote the redevelopment on the site, they range from cash grants and development incentives, site redevelopment, utility and other street improvements, property assembly, and upgrades to the landscaping on the site. So all of those are potential expenditures envisioned in order to take the site from its current status to the status that we hope it will evolve to over time that we'll get to in a couple slides here. Okay. As I'd mentioned, this is a blighted area tax increment district. So for the Plan Commission's benefit, I just wanted to include in the presentation what is in the statute that defines the blight site for the creation of a tax increment district. And that's the first couple of bullet points that you see on the screen. The third bullet point, just to reiterate what the blight means, the blight finding on this site is only for the purposes of creating a tax increment district. It's not about the property's value, current value, nor is it any sort of a first step in an eminent domain or a property taking process. The finding is solely, again, for the purposes of creating this tax increment district. Okay, so as I had mentioned a couple slides ago, we have a preliminary list of project expenditures that are deemed to be necessary to take the existing site and hopefully turn it into what you're seeing on the screen now, which is the proposed redevelopment project. And just to highlight a couple things, and I know we have people who are some of the development group that's more versed in the specifics of the site, but to talk about it, we've got corporate user potential on the site. There are condos, there is senior living, there's retail, there is other corporate high-tech potential sites. There is a baseball field included and for a baseball team. Redevelopment of the existing structure that was there for viewing the dog races into new use for business purposes. So all of those are potential redevelopment on this site, again, to take it from its current value, approximately $5 million, to what we hope to see something in and around $150 million as the full build-out of the site gradually occurs. And looking at that, not from a visual standpoint, but from a numbers standpoint, what you see on page 8 is a gradual build-out of the St. Croix Meadows redevelopment site and the additional value from the baseball stadium, the redoing of the existing structure, the corporate users building operations out there, retail and hotel development, senior living and condo development are all listed there. And what you're seeing is a gradual, from year to year, build out with the new taxable value over the life of the tax increment district, growing to, again, $150 million at its apex, at its highest point. One question that we did get at an earlier meeting, I'll point out to this group too, the projections that we're doing right now are solely looking at the $150 million. We're not adding any inflationary component to it. The hope would be is you'd get the construction, and as well as the construction value and the initial taxable value, that there's some inflationary factor on that, like happens on most properties over time. But to hopefully approach this conservatively, we've not included that inflationary increment in the projections. On page 9, we took that proposed development going from, again, 0 increment value now up to 150 million. And then we put together a finance plan for the expenditures that we talked about, which was the cash grant, the development incentives, the infrastructure improvements, all of that. And that's what is seen on this chart on page 9. Couple things just highlight on here. The initial expense, which is a municipal revenue obligation, or what we would also call a pay-as-you-go bond issue, is a financing in the amount of approximately 17 million for the purposes of redeveloping the site. And for financing of tax increment eligible projects, they usually fall into a couple different quadrants. One is what I would call a city-funded TIF, and that involves the city issuing debt, being responsible for the repayment of the debt, and then hopefully using the tax increment revenue that gets generated to repay the debt. But in that model, the city-funded model, if there isn't sufficient revenue from the tax increment district to pay the debt, the city has to use another source. What's being talked about for this initial and the largest expense is a different funding for tax increment called the pay-as-you-go funding model. And in that model, you still quantify TIF-eligible expenses like we talked about a couple slides ago. But instead of the city issuing debt that the city stands behind, general obligation debt or utility-backed debt of the city, the developer incurs those costs up front, but they do so with an agreement with the city that says if you incur those costs and do the improvements, and you cause the development to occur that takes the increment value from 0, which it is now, we've got the base value of 5 million, but no new increment value. If we can take that from that value to up to 150 million, as we talk about in the plan, what we as the city will do as we collect the tax revenue on that 150 million in new development, we will pay it back to you up until the amount of the expenses that you incurred. And again, in the plan, that's at 17 million. And while that pay-as-you-go model is not a fit for every project, it is, from the city standpoint, it allows you to assist in promoting redevelopment without putting capital out there that you are issuing and is backed by the full faith and credit of the city.
It makes me ask the question then, is the city becoming the bank for the developer then?
No, in the event where the city would issue the debt and pay those expenses up front, I would say that's much more of a being the banker than entering into an agreement where if you spend the money and you create the development, when the taxes on that new development are paid to the city,
Okay.
we will take them and pay them back to you up until the agreed upon amount. So that's the model that we're talking about here.
Thank you.
Pat?
Who ends up holding the bag if we have another 2008 again and the economy screeches to a halt? Nobody is winning in this scenario, but what's our exposure there? Downside.
Yeah, so on the pay-as-you-go approach, and I'll just do the very
Yeah,
worst-case scenario. If we entered into an agreement with the development group and said, here it is, you guys spend the money, and then when you create the new tax value, we'll pay the tax revenue back to you. If no tax value got paid, they wouldn't get any money, and the city would not be out at all. Now, what I will say in this model, there is some expenditures, and you'll see it in the chart there. It is anticipated that this initial phase will have $2 million of improvements along Carmichael that feed into the site. And the preliminary plan on that is that the city will issue the debt, and we expect it to be $2 million for that. And that amount the city will back, but we're also expecting to set the development agreement in a way that those expenses will be covered first, and then the pay-as-you-go 17 million would be second in that model. But looking at that 17 million, to answer your question specifically, the way the model that we're planning on negotiating through the development agreement right now, and that's ongoing, is that if development doesn't occur at all, that risk is completely borne by the development group, not the city of Hudson.
Okay.
Any other questions on this particular slide? Okay. Where I wanted
Sean,
to...
talk a little bit about the length of the TID.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah,
That was a
thank you.
question that came up.
Yes. Yep. Wonder if I can go back. There we go. Thank you for pointing that out, Mike. The projections that we have now, the maximum life of the tax increment district is 27 years. The projections we're using now, and again, we have no inflationary increment expected, it's just the actual construction value originally, is that the TIF district number 5 will have paid its expenses back in about 20 years, rather than the full 27 years. And that's highlighted on the right side of the page. I know the numbers are very small on there, but at the point that the city has accumulated sufficient funds to pay off any debt that's outstanding, at that point, they would be able to prepay the debt and close the district down. So our hope is that this is a conservative representation of where this tax increment district is going, and that we can even close it sooner than the 20 years. But based on the preliminary model, the conservative model, that is the expected life of the district. 27 is the max. This one is projected right now at about 20.
So, and again, Sean, you probably said this, but the max, the 27 max is statutory. That's as long as they can go statutorily.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Well, that goes back to what we said earlier, and I asked of you, I mean, well, then what is the life of this thing? I mean, you're saying 27's the max. If the dog tract had been developed in 2001, it's likely it would have been paid off now. And so that leads to say, well, hey, in 15 years, are we done with this? That's why that question came up.
Sure.
And it's quite possible. Our experience with the last TIF district that we did was the business park, and that closed out in, how many years did you say? 12 or 15?
I think we had, it was 12 to 15 years.
And it closed out very early.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah, and thanks for the reminder. I tried to get back to that question. Oops. Okay. To finish up then, before I suppose opening it up for any additional questions, I wanted to update the Plan Commission on the timeline. As I'd mentioned, we did have that initial meeting of the Joint Review Board, and again, that's representatives from the county, school district, tech college. The mayor is the city representative and the chairperson of the group, and then there was an at-large member, a fifth member, that was selected by that group of 4. So we now have our fully constituted Joint Review Board, and the material that we're discussing in the Plan Commission meeting tonight, we also went over with them, and they gave us some feedback. Plan Commission public hearing is the next step. We're doing that now, and there is a resolution on the agenda for the Plan Commission this evening that would recommend moving the tax increment district forward for the city council review at that point. Preliminarily, it's on the agenda, or will be on the agenda, for the July 17th city council meeting. And we've also set up later that week, I think on the 20th, a second and final meeting of the Joint Review Board. They have a vote, just like the Plan Commission and the City Council, on the creation of the district. So that's what we're looking at moving forward on this. But at this point, if there's any questions of the Plan Commission, in addition to what we've already talked about, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Anybody have any questions? This is also a public hearing, so we can now take comment from anybody else that would like to comment on this. Yes, come on up, please. Identify yourself, please, and give your address.
Doug Rowan, 295 Riverview Drive. One of the things I saw in this presentation was this includes any projects within a half mile of the site.
Potentially, yes.
Well, that's what the presentation said.
Well, it doesn't necessarily include anything within a half mile, but it would be, they might be eligible.
So is there a representative of the town of Troy on the Joint Review Board? And if not, why not?
Go ahead, Sean.
Maybe I can answer that. A couple of things, and your question reminded me. The project costs, just so the Plan Commission knows, that are in the project plan, they need to be in there in order to be tax increment eligible expenses. But by being in the plan, they're not expenses that the city has already agreed to. Each of the expenses, the incentives, all have to go before the city council for review. Secondarily, the half-mile rule is currently restricted to just within the corporate boundaries. So within a half mile of the district, but also has to be within the corporate boundaries of the city of Hudson. So we couldn't do an expenditure in the town of Troy.
YMCA camp.
If it's not in the city, no. We couldn't.
Intersection of Carmichael and Riverview Drive.
If,
Yes, and that's a good thing to point out, is any project that the city would do has to be identified in the project plan. And within the draft project plan is, yes, improvements to that intersection, as well as the southern entrance to the site, proposed southern access, and the existing overpass and on-ramp on the
So maybe I'll
Carmichael.
ask the question differently. How is the town of Troy involved in the process?
Through the county. It's not,
Statutorily, under the TIF law, there is not any representation that the statute has for anyone other than the county, city, school district, and the tech college. But in terms of public meeting and public input, there's nothing stopping someone from.
I mean, my house is within a half mile of this property,
Yeah.
as is the YMCA Camp Sequoia. So how are they involved in
Well, currently,
the projects that are proposed in your presentation?
there isn't any expense for a project that is outside of the boundaries of the city of Hudson. So there isn't any project to spend money from the TIF district anywhere outside the corporate boundaries of the city.
So it's not possible to have future projects outside of that based on this proposal?
Yeah.
Those are excluded.
Yeah, under the current law, and the reason I'm mentioning this is there is a law that's at the state now that would allow tax increment projects to go outside of the corporate boundaries. But the current law and what this plan has in it does not envision that at all at this point. If that law passes, and at a later date, the council chose to amend the district, that would be a possibility, but currently, that's not an option, to use TIF for anything outside of the corporate boundaries.
Would that have to be with the approval of, in this case, the town of Troy? Or if we wanted to expand beyond the corporate boundaries, would we need the approval of the contiguous municipality in order to do that?
Under this proposed law?
Yes.
That I'd have to check on for sure. What I do know about that proposed law, Mayor, is that the town is requesting that this could be done. So in that case, the town
Okay.
is supportive of the law change. But whether if they were to approve it and add something like you're describing, that there needs to be some town representation, or whether this law already includes that, I'd have to do some more research on that.
Okay, Pat?
Current law, you cannot spend money in the town using the TIF.
Pat?
If I understand it correctly, if we had to make improvements to, let's say, the Carmichael overpass on 94, we could pack that into this because it was directly connected. But we couldn't pack in a new bridge on 11th Street because it's not related in any way and it's not within the half mile. Am I correct in saying that?
The way I understand it.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's a way of how do we handle the financing of the project, and that would be out of the bounds of the
Right.
financing. Okay.
In the plan now, Mike alluded to, there are some half-mile projects in there along Carmichael that are envisioned as part of the
Right.
plan. But that's the extent of it now, not in the town.
Are those enumerated
Yeah,
in this?
yeah, it's, actually, let me give you a copy.
I guess my only request would be, if anything's impacting the town of Troy, it'd be nice if somebody representing the town of Troy was on the joint review board, if the project expands to that.
Sure. Well, and I, the joint review board is comprised of taxing authorities that are within the bounds of the project. So Troy right now is not within the bounds of the project. It is not a taxing authority that's affected by this.
That's fair.
Okay?
But
And believe me, if we were to go
it's
beyond,
the half-mile extension is the question.
right, I got it, yep. There's no way that we would even consider anything outside of our boundaries without talking to somebody, the affected parties. And right now, we don't envision anything at all.
Thank you very much.
All right, anybody else? Comment, public comment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ron Howard, 1902 Shasta Drive, Hudson, Wisconsin. I just have two questions. Did the other 4 tax district come out ahead? Or were they losses? Did you make money on the first 4 tax districts?
Oh, the tax increment finance districts? Well, they were, I don't know if you could say they came out ahead. I can definitely tell you that the business park came out ahead, but they were all paid off and there were no losses to the city or to any of the other taxing authorities for this.
So they were all paid off in time?
Right.
Or ahead of time?
Right. Correct.
And I believe you said 27 years is the maximum?
By statute, yes.
On the internet in St. Croix County, there's 3 blighted areas that are in, according to the state, are in financial trouble, and they've all added 20 years. What, they don't have to do the 27-year?
I would need more information. I don't know. And when you say blighted areas, were they TIF districts?
Yes.
Tax increment
They
districts?
were, it's on the state of Wisconsin internet site that shows TIF districts in the state.
Is it an
And there's
overlay?
3 of them in St. Croix County, and all 3 are considered troubled. And they've all added 20 years.
Yeah, maybe I can expound on that. There was a provision in the TIF law, it is since sunsetted, but it was there, that allowed a community, after going through the same process we're going through, including talking to the other taxing jurisdictions, to declare their district distressed or also severely distressed. Those were the options. On the severely distressed option, you had the option of taking a district from its current maximum life up to, I think it was 40 years term. Yeah, and that provision was there. Most of the reason the state did that was the economic downturn, and a number of tax increment districts went into, and weren't cash flowing at that time. So that has sunsetted though. So under the current law, there is no ability to take this district and extend it out another 20 years.
Okay, that's all I wondered. I just seen on there, it said they were in trouble, and
Yep, no, that was a provision that was available, but no longer
Thank you, and
is.
thank you for taking the time to look into that. Anybody else? Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion and possible action on June 6, 2017 meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on an application for a conditional use permit submitted by Hudson YMCA for a temporary use structure, the storage container in the skate park area at 2211 Vine Street. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve that, but I would like to put the review at 12 months, and I'd like to heavily emphasize that we don't like storage containers as storage units, and that how quickly could you fix that to something more that would fit in there a little bit better or something like that. I don't know, maybe that's hopefully not an outlandish request, but just the idea of a steel storage container sitting there. So, move to approve with a 12-month review.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on an application for conditional use permit submitted by Hop and Barrel Brewing Company LLC, Justin Turbees, to operate a brewery at 310 Second Street.
Obviously, this is a continuation of the discussion that took place, I think, my first meeting in amending the zoning code to allow for brewery operations downtown in the B3 district. Justin put together a very thorough application in terms of a narrative on each of the code sections, on the requirements in the B3 district. Staff's comfortable at this time recommending approval. We did get one comment via email from a resident to be entered into the record, inquiring about whether there be smell or parking issues with it. Obviously, this site has its own parking lot currently. They meet the requirement there, and then obviously the smell issue was addressed in their narrative, and staff at this time is comfortable with recommending approval.
You recommend, so you're recommending approval with subject to review after 12 months with the other recommendations that on your sheet?
Correct. Yep.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve this. All the places like this that I've been to in other cities have been very well done and very attractive to people and bring people in downtown, don't appear to be trouble. I want to attach the conditions that Mike put forward on that as part of this, and I wish them well.
I'll second it.
Okay, got a motion, a second? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Just, excuse me, just to ask, is there a projected opening date? I was just curious.
Did you want to be there?
I'm certain we'll all be invited to that.
I can actually comment on that. We actually just received our federal brewer's permit as of early this morning.
Oh, okay.
Equipment is shipping the week of 9/11. Provided build-out and all the stuff with the contractors go well, we are shooting for a soft opening at the end of October, and late October, early November, we should be open at full capacity.
Sounds great.
Excellent. I think it's going to be a great addition to downtown. Good luck. Thank you. Discussion and possible action on consideration of resolution designating proposed boundaries and approving a project plan for tax incremental district number 5, City of Hudson, Wisconsin, resolution number 2-17.
I have another question on that. Is then the value assigned to that it's 30 million or whatever the number was, or how does that work, or is that yet to be determined?
I think that's a good point. Just because the number is 17 million in the project plan or 8 million for the debt that the city might issue, we were very conservative in terms of, we didn't want to be short if there was a public project that needed to take place, whether it be on Carmichael, anything like that. We aren't obligated to the full amount of 30 million. Right, Sean? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, the process that we're going through of creating the district is happening at the same time that we are working with the development group on a development agreement and the amount of the incentives and those other steps. So all that is occurring at the same time. The project costs and the development that is in the plan are projections. Everything has to be finalized and brought back before the council for approval. The plan is just what it is. It's a plan, and it allows us to use this tool to help incentivize the redevelopment on that site.
So costs yet to be determined. You just want the classification to proceed with this, and we'll find out, or we'll hear what those costs are, or at some point.
You will. Before anything is finalized, like I said, it's still going to have to come through the process that every other project for the city does.
Okay.
But I think it isn't, I wouldn't describe the numbers as pie in the sky. I mean, we're working from some discussions back and forth with the development group, but is it 100% final? No, it's not. We're still working at that.
I'll move we recommend approval to the Common Council Resolution number 217.
I'll second that.
Got a motion second for approval. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Any other business or other business for information of Mike?
We need to set our next meeting date, understanding that the next regular meeting would have been July 4th. Does everybody want to check their calendars or what days might work? We do have a lot coming up, obviously. This has kind of been the first meeting in a while that we haven't had planning-related approval or consideration for Carmichael, or for St. Croix Meadows, but there will be some more forthcoming. So I certainly want to have a meeting or request a meeting
How about the 11th?
needed.
I'm not available the 11th.
I'm gone. Okay, well, then that answers that. And you are hinting the agenda is gonna be full, so a morning meeting or something like that will not be able to accommodate it, Mike? A morning meeting won't be able to accommodate it, you'll have too much on the agenda?
I would be able to accommodate a morning meeting. I'm already here.
7:30. Well, I'm just trying to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah,
that's
we
all.
have business park meetings at 7:30. I mean, I'm open to whatever time, but I also understand people have busy schedules and work and.
Right, if we could limit it to 30 to 45 minutes, I think, even if we had to have two.
I was like, Thursday the 6th
I'm good with that.
in the morning,
I'm gone all month.
all month?
Yeah,
Well,
Well, you disqualified yourself.
yeah, you're out.
yeah.
Everybody else? I mean, we gotta get it done in July, so,
Right. On Thursday, July 6th, are you talking morning, I'm sorry, morning
Yep.
or afternoon?
morning.
Okay.
7:30, 8 o'clock?
I can do it.
Yeah, it can't be any later. We have to, yep, that'll work.
What time you wanna do it?
Let's do 8 a.m.
8 o'clock?
How about,
How about 7:30?
7:45, no. 7:30 is good.
We're splitting hairs.
We can do that. I live here now, so
I know
it
that.
works
Well,
well.
we're not picking on you, come on.
what's wrong with 7:30?
7:30 is good.
We're talking July 6th.
Yes, Thursday, July 6th.
That helps intrusion on other subjects, so the earlier.
Do you anticipate another, I'm just thinking ahead, July meeting, or do you have a thought on that?
What does, like, say, the 12th look like? Or the 13th?
If we do on the 7th, we'll still need one on the 12th?
Well, I'm questioning depending upon, because we have submittal deadlines for different projects, so if, to allow us enough time to review and then put materials out, I want to make sure that,
I'm not available on the 13th.
okay. How about the 12th at 7:30 a.m.?
Say that again?
The 12th at 7:30 a.m.
Tentatively, yes.
Tentatively, yes. It'll be one of those two. Then it'll either be 7:06 or 7:12 at 7:30 a.m. And that'll be dictated by the time frame that I get information from the applicants.
Oh,
Please,
so not both, one or the other?
One or the other.
Oh, I misunderstood. All right. Very good.
yeah, just please survey us, to see if anything's changed, with enough in advance notice that you can move it if you had to.
Perfect. No, that helps a lot. Helps a lot.
But as a general rule, we're sticking to evening though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not.
No, we're trying to accommodate what you said, that's
Anything
all.
other than?
Short term.
The 12th will be a 7:30 too.
Okay.
Oh, that was the 12th, huh?
If we're done, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Let me get up to speed on my calendar.
You need to look up.
All right, so, motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.